Imagine this. You are walking down an empty street. No one notices you. No sound answers you. There is only your own voice, echoing again and again inside your head. You hear the words you have spoken before, the casual self-denials, the unthinking complaints, the habitual jokes. Strangely, these words have not faded with time. They linger like echoes, shaping the way you see the world. You say, "I can't do it," and somehow you really can't. You say, "Life is boring," and everything loses its color. Have you ever considered that every word you speak is quietly rewriting your life? If you look closely, you'll discover an unsettling truth. Language is not harmless expression. It works more like a spell. The more you repeat a certain phrase, the more you become enslaved to it. You might laugh when you say, "I'm unlucky," or "I always mess things up," but do you realize these words are seeping into your subconscious, building an invisible prison around you? You think you are just joking, but in reality, you are writing the verdict of your own destiny. And here lies the disturbing question. Who is really speaking? Are you using language, or is language using you? When you say, "I can't do it," is that truly your voice, or is it the voice of society, parents, the education system flowing through your mouth? You believe you are expressing yourself, but in truth, you may only be a recorder repeating the scripts that others handed to you. You think you command language, but in fact, language commands you. Consider the phrases you take for granted. Reality is cruel. Human nature is selfish. Success means working to the extreme. They sound so self-evident. But have you ever asked, where did they come from? Are they absolute truths or merely beliefs implanted in you through endless repetition? You never verified them, yet you use them to explain your struggles, to define your very life. You think you are telling the truth, but perhaps you are just inheriting a pre-written script. And this is the most terrifying part. Language does not merely describe the world, it constructs it. You say, "This is my fate," and it becomes fate. You say, "I'm worthless," and it erases your possibilities. You don't even realize your vocabulary is the boundary of your life. The philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein once said, "The limits of my language mean the limits of my world." And you are living inside a well-built of words, mistaking it for the entire sky. So now you must ask yourself, if language can shape destiny, where are the words you utter every day pushing you toward? Are you really saying what you want to say, or only repeating what they want you to believe? Can you be certain that every I you speak truly belongs to you? And if the answer is no, if you never fully owned your own language, then have you ever truly owned your own life? This is only the beginning. Think about it carefully. If your words are not merely sounds, but the very architecture of your reality, then who laid the foundations? Why do certain phrases cling to you like shadows, while others never even occur to you? This is where psychology and philosophy begin to converge, where thinkers like Carl Jung and Friedrich Nietzsche force us to confront an uncomfortable truth. You are not as free as you imagine. Carl Jung once argued that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. But how does the unconscious communicate? Through symbols, images, and yes, through language. The phrases you speak without thinking are often not yours at all. They are the voice of your shadow, the repressed side of you that whispers from the depths. When you casually mutter, "I don't deserve better," or "I'm not good enough," what you are really hearing is the echo of unexamined wounds. Words, in this sense, are the smoke trails of inner battles you haven't yet faced. Nietzsche, on the other hand, warned against the tyranny of inherited truths. For him, most people live as herd animals, repeating the moral slogans of their culture as though they were eternal laws. This is right, that is wrong, this is possible, that is impossible. But Nietzsche insisted that these words are not neutral, they are weapons. They are designed to tame you, to keep you from becoming what he called the Bermensch, the one who dares to create new values. Every time you repeat society's cliches, money is everything, failure is shameful, happiness is the absence of struggle *, you are kneeling before a collective vocabulary that was never yours to begin with. Do you see the problem? The words that shape you most deeply are often those you never chose. They were spoken into you by parents who carried their own wounds, by teachers who echoed a system, by media that thrives on fear and conformity. You internalize these voices so completely that now you mistake them for your own thoughts. In psychological terms, This is introjection, the swallowing of beliefs without digestion, the acceptance of language as absolute reality. But here's where it gets even more dangerous. Once these words settle into your psyche, they create self-fulfilling prophecies. Tell a child often enough that they are lazy or difficult, and eventually they will embody those words. Tell yourself repeatedly that you are not capable of love, and you will sabotage every relationship just to prove your words were right. The brain itself is wired to comply with language. Neuroscientists describe this as the power of priming. Words don't just describe reality, they prime your perception of it. When you say, "I'm unlucky," your attention unconsciously filters for evidence of misfortune. You ignore every moment of grace, every chance encounter, because your words have already instructed your brain on what to see. Arthur Schopenhauer, the great pessimist, once wrote that we are at the mercy of the representation of the world, meaning we never encounter the raw truth of existence, we only experience it through the filters of thought and language. If that is the case, then every careless phrase you repeat is not just commentary, it is the very lens through which you live. You are not simply saying life is meaningless, you are living a meaningless life, because those words have clouded every possible meaning from your view. Now pause for a moment. Imagine your life as a vast canvas. Every word you speak is a brushstroke. Some are bold, others faint, but together they form an image. The tragedy is that most people are painting with someone else's palette, someone else's brush, someone else's hand guiding theirs. They wake up one day, look at the picture of their life, and wonder, why does it feel so foreign? Why doesn't this look like me? But how could it? If the words were never your own, the life could never be yours. This is not just an individual problem, it is cultural, systemic. Aldous Huxley once warned that language is the most powerful tool of mass control. Entire societies are shaped by slogans, by repetitive mantras that seep into collective consciousness. Freedom is security, more is better, you are what you consume. These are not innocent phrases. They are subtle cages, turning citizens into obedient consumers, believers, subjects. You may think you are free, but when your very vocabulary has been engineered by systems of power, can freedom even be spoken? And so here we arrive at the deeper root. Language is both mirror and master. It reflects your unconscious wounds, your inherited scripts, your cultural conditioning, but it also dictates the possibilities of your becoming. This is why Nietzsche urged us to become poets of our own lives, to forge new words, new meanings, instead of being trapped in the vocabulary of the herd. But before we leap to solutions, sit with this question. If your words are shaping your reality, then who's shaping your words? Is it truly you or the ghostly chorus of voices that came before you? And if you have never claimed ownership of your own language, then what part of your life has ever truly been yours? The descent goes deeper still. You might think words are fragile things, like smoke that vanishes as soon as it's spoken. But what if they are not smoke, but seeds? Seeds that fall into the soil of your subconscious, grow roots in silence, and one day emerge as the very shape of your destiny. Consider this. A single sentence spoken to you in childhood can echo for decades. You're not enough, you're too much, people like you never succeed. These words don't disappear. They lodge themselves in the architecture of your mind. They color how you interpret every rejection, every opportunity, every relationship. They become invisible scripts guiding your behavior, scripts you don't even realize you are following. And because they are invisible, you never question them, you live them. This is how words turn into self-fulfilling prophecies. A person told they are not lovable unconsciously seeks out relationships that will confirm this narrative. Someone convinced they are bad with money avoids financial opportunities, fulfills the prophecy, and calls it reality. Words become the prophecy becomes behavior, and behavior reinforces the words. The cycle tightens unseen until it feels like fate. The brain itself conspires in this process. Psychologists call it the confirmation bias. Once you hold a belief, your mind scans for evidence to support it. If the belief comes in the form of words, "I am unlucky, the world is cruel," your perception will bend itself to match. You notice every small failure and call it destiny. You overlook every sign of possibility, because your words have already instructed your eyes on what to see. Think about society on a larger scale. Words don't just shape individuals, They sculpt entire cultures. The slogans we repeat, the cliches we absorb, the political rhetoric we chant, they all seep into collective consciousness. When a society endlessly repeats growth as progress or winning as everything, it wires its people to chase speed, profit, and competition, even if it leaves them spiritually empty. When a culture insists failure is shameful, it raises generations terrified of risk, enslaved by the fear of trying. Words function like operating systems. Once installed, they quietly dictate every decision without ever revealing their code. Here lies the true danger. Words do not announce themselves as chains. They masquerade as truth. You don't hear this as just language. You hear this as reality. That is why they are so insidious. Nobody questions the phrases that have always been there. Nobody doubts the inner voice that says, "This is just who I am." But what if that inner voice isn't really you? What if it is a ventriloquist using your own mouth to keep you trapped? Consider addiction as an example. Gabor Mate, who studied the psychology of addiction, argues that beneath every compulsive behavior lies an unspoken phrase, "I can't bear this pain," or "I am not enough as I am." These words, rarely spoken out loud, drive people to numb themselves with substances, screens, or endless distractions. Addiction is not just chemical, it is linguistic. It is a story you tell yourself until the story devours you. Even silence is not safe. The words you do not say can also shape you. Every time you suppress a thought, every time you silence your truth out of fear, you create a vacuum where shadows thrive. Jung warned that what we refuse to acknowledge in ourselves becomes the shadow, and the shadow will rule us in darkness. Unspoken words are like ghosts. They haunt you, they drive your behavior, and yet they remain unseen. Now imagine multiplying this across an entire society. Millions of people carrying hidden scripts, unexamined mantras, unconscious slogans. What kind of world does that create? A world where people chase goals they never chose. A world where men silence their vulnerability because they've inherited the phrase "real men don't cry." A world where women shrink their voices because somewhere along the line someone told them you're being too loud. A world where success is defined by words like status, wealth, power, and where everyone silently agrees to sacrifice their inner truth to fit those definitions. And so we return to the paradox. Words are invisible, yet their consequences are enormous. They are the quietest dictators, the most invisible architects of reality. They write destinies while pretending to be harmless chatter. The most haunting part, you rarely notice the damage until it's too late. Until you wake up one day, staring at a life that feels alien, wondering why your choices feel scripted. You tell yourself this is just the way life is, but maybe it isn't. Maybe it's just the way the words have shaped it. So ask yourself if your life feels suffocating. Is it truly reality suffocating you, or is it the words you've been breathing for too long? Words that have grown stale, poisonous, invisible. This is the hidden danger. If you do not become conscious of your words, they will write your life for you, and you will call it fate. But what if it isn't fate? What if it's just a story, and stories can be rewritten? That's where the rebellion begins. Rebellion doesn't always start with grand revolutions or fiery speeches. Sometimes it begins with something deceptively small, a pause, a single moment when you stop mid-thought and ask yourself, whose words am I actually speaking? This is where the fracture begins, because once you dare to ask that question, the script trembles. The cage, for the first time, shows cracks. You see, the most radical act you can commit against the invisible tyranny of words is awareness. To catch the phrase as it slithers through your mind, "I'm not good enough," and freeze it under the spotlight. You ask, who told me that, when, and why did I believe them? This act alone is rebellious because you are refusing to live as a passive actor in someone else's play. You are breaking the hypnosis, but awareness alone is not enough. You must replace. The mind does not operate well on empty space. It craves narrative. It seeks language. If you only strip away the poisonous words without planting new ones, the weeds will return. So you begin to re-script, not with shallow affirmations you don't believe, but with words that feel raw and true. Instead of "I am broken," you say, "I am healing." Instead of "I am powerless," you whisper, "I am learning to choose." It feels awkward at first, like speaking a language you barely know. But every revolution begins with a new tongue. Look at history's rebels of the soul. Nietzsche shattered the word God and replaced it with Mensch, forcing humanity to rethink its potential. Jung refused to accept madness as mere illness. He rescripted it as the psyche's attempt at transformation. Even Dostoevsky, in the depths of prison camps, found language for human freedom in places where every word was meant to strip him of dignity. They all knew. To reclaim life, you must reclaim the vocabulary through which you see it. You to have that power. To notice how often your inner monologue sounds like an echo of parents, teachers, society. To notice that when you say I can't, it's rarely your authentic voice, it's inherited. And inheritance can be refused. You can return what doesn't belong to you. The rebellion also requires silence, not the silence of suppression, but the silence of listening. Beneath the noise of borrowed words, there is a quieter voice waiting. Call it intuition, call it the soul, call it whatever you like, but it has always been there, speaking in feelings, images, impulses, too subtle to fit into rigid sentences. If you allow yourself to listen, you'll discover a voice that doesn't demand, doesn't judge, doesn't repeat cliches. It whispers what feels true. This is the voice you must learn to trust. Yet rebellion is not safe. The moment you break away from inherited scripts, the world will notice. People who live comfortably inside their borrowed words will feel threatened by yours. They may call you arrogant, ungrateful, unrealistic. They will try to drag you back into the common language because your freedom exposes their chains. This resistance is inevitable, but remember, every revolution is met with pushback. The louder the resistance, the clearer the proof that you are shaking the system. So how do you endure? You surround yourself with new words, words that breathe life instead of death. Books that challenge, conversations that ignite, poetry that stirs something deep inside you. You choose carefully what enters your mental bloodstream because you now understand. Words are not entertainment, they are nutrition, and toxic nutrition poisons the psyche. Imagine a person who has lived their whole life believing I am invisible. Their posture, choices, even dreams shrink to fit this phrase. Now imagine the rebellion. They began repeating, I have the right to be seen. At first it feels absurd. Their body resists, their old scripts laugh. But with persistence, the body starts to change. They walk differently, they speak louder, they take risks, and slowly, life bends to match the new script. This is not magic, it is the brutal logic of language. Rebellion, then, is not a single event, it is a practice, a discipline of noticing, questioning, replacing, listening. It is daily work, like sharpening a sword that has grown dull from disuse. Some days you will slip back into the old language. Some days the inherited voice will be louder than yours. That's Fine. Every revolution has setbacks. What matters is that you continue, that you remember. You are not fighting for better words, you are fighting for your life, because the ultimate rebellion is not against society, not against family, not even against culture. It is against the invisible tyrant inside your own head, the one who whispers old words and calls them truth. Once you overthrow that tyrant, no external cage can hold you, and so the rebellion begins quietly, almost imperceptibly, not with shouting in the streets, but with the stillness of you, alone, whispering to yourself a sentence that feels frighteningly new. And in that whisper, a new world is born. But what is that world? And what is the ultimate truth hidden beneath all these words, the one insight that can completely shift how you see your life? That, perhaps, is the final revelation. Here is the paradox you've been circling around from the very beginning. Words are powerful enough to build or destroy your life, yet at the deepest level, you are not the words. Let that sink in. You are not the stories, not the labels, not the sentences looping in your head. You are the awareness that hears them. The stage has never been the actor. This realization is both liberating and terrifying. Liberating because it means you are never truly imprisoned. Every word, no matter how heavy, is only a costume draped over your being. Terrifying because if you are not the words, then who are you? If your entire identity has been constructed out of language, what remains when the words are stripped away? Silence. Silence is what remains, and in that silence an encounter with something raw, vast, and unspeakable. A you that cannot be pinned down with adjectives, that cannot be caged by definitions. It is not the successful you, not the broken you, not even the spiritual you. It is the witness, timeless, unshaken, prior to every word. This is what mystics across cultures have been pointing to. The Buddhists called it Anya, emptiness. The Taoists called it the Da, that which cannot be named. The mystic Meister Eckhart spoke of a ground of the soul beyond all images and words. What they were all pointing to is this: the deepest truth about you cannot be spoken, and yet, paradoxically, you must use words to walk toward that truth. Words are both the chain and the key. You use them to see through themselves. Like a ladder you climb only to throw it away once you've reached the top. Here is where everything converges. The rebellion against words is not about creating the perfect script that will finally fix your life. It is about realizing that no script can ever fully contain you. You play with words, you rewrite them, you use them as tools, but you stop confusing the tool for your essence. Imagine this: a child grows up hearing, "You are weak." That phrase shapes everything. But then one day, the child grows into an adult who sees the sentence for what it was: a fragment of language, nothing more. In that moment, the word dissolves, and in its place emerges silence pregnant with possibility. That silence is who you truly are, a space vast enough to hold every story, but never reduced to a single one. This is the ultimate revelation. You are not what you say to yourself. You are the one listening. And once you grasp this, life changes in subtle but profound ways. You stop clinging so desperately to labels. You stop arguing over identities as if they are life or death. You can play roles without losing yourself in them, because you know the actor is never consumed by the character. Words become lighter, still powerful, but no longer tyrannical. Think of it like music. A single note can move you to tears, but silence is the canvas that makes the music possible. Without silence, there would be no sound. Without the wordless awareness that you are, there would be no meaning in words. You are the silence behind the symphony. This truth doesn't mean you abandon words entirely. On the contrary, it allows you to use them more consciously. You speak not from compulsion, not from inherited scripts, but from choice. Your words become intentional, like brushstrokes on a canvas. You begin to notice how every sentence shapes the atmosphere of your life. You can choose words of bitterness or words of courage, words that bind or words that set free. But now with this insight, you no longer confuse the paint with the painter. You know where your power lies. So let's return to the question we began with. What if the words you use every day are shaping the course of your life? The answer is, they are, but deeper than that, you are the one who can step back, see the words for what they are, and choose differently. And deeper still, beyond the choosing, beyond even the words themselves, you are the silence that no word can touch. And in that silence, there is freedom. Freedom not as a concept, not as a slogan, but as a direct experience. The realization that nothing said about you by others, by society, by your own mind can ever capture you. You are not the cage, you are not even the rebellion. You are the open sky in which both the cage and the rebellion appear. This is the final truth, the one that shatters every illusion. Words may influence your life, but they do not define your being. Once you understand this, you can play with them, shape them, wield them with power without ever forgetting that the deepest part of you has never been touched by a single syllable. And so you walk away not with an answer, but with a new way of seeing. A way that makes every conversation, every thought, every whisper a chance to ask, am I speaking the words, or are the words speaking me? The difference between those two questions is the difference between living in a prison and living in truth. And now the choice is yours.